Morning, everyone. You're welcome to our webinar on the subject of after COVID, maintaining IT security from home and in the office. So my name is Adrian Kelly. I'm the marketing manager here in CommSec. I'm joined this morning, as always, by Joe Montgomery, the head of sales in CommSec. And our special guest this morning is Jonathan Hope. He's the systems engineer from Sophos. And between the two guys, what we're going to do is look at, I suppose, Joe will kick off initially and we'll have a brief introduction to CommSec and the experience we've had over the last year, I guess, helping our customers, staff working remotely from home during the pandemic. With the return to normality on the horizon at last, we're now looking at a situation where many businesses are planning a new hybrid model of staff working at home some of the time and in the office and coming and going a lot more flexibly than before. So with all that in mind, we thought we'd put this session on this morning to look at what that means for IT security. So Jonathan's going to give us the view of the past year from Sophos, and as most of you will probably know, they're a world-leading, vendor in the area of endpoint protection and security, and they're going to give us their input in terms of what they've seen, and then looking into the new hybrid working model in the future and what that needs to address or what businesses need to be thinking about to ensure security is maintained. So please send us your questions and we'll go through them at the end. And there's a little question box function there, just type them in. And so for now, I'm going to hand you over to Joe to get started. And Joe, as I said, is going to give a quick introduction, a bit of context where all this began with us, why we've decided to put this on. So over to you, Joe, in your own time.
Hi, Adrian. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending our webinar. I hope everybody can see my screen there. Just to say that this is the third webinar in a series that we've been running over the last number of months. The previous webinars were on password management, which we feel is a very important area and quite forgotten by a lot of organizations. And the most recent session was around penetration testing and vulnerability scanning and the differences between those and why people or organizations should consider these to help improve their IT security. Both of those webinars, the recordings of those are available on on the CommSec website. That's www.commsec.ie. So I'm just going to set the scene for today's session. And with regards to the changes in people working from home, good security practices have become much more important. And the lack of security can result in, I suppose, significant losses if you're breached or compromised. Yeah, whether it's confidential information is lost, valuables are stolen, i.e. credit card details, or there's even just a general disruption to your end users being able to do or carry out their duties. So what we're looking to achieve is just confidentiality of your company's data, the integrity of the data is still there, and the availability for your users to access the data and do their day-to-day job. So just as a sort of as an introduction, organizations need to ensure that they have their systems, PCs, laptops patched, that all their security tools are enabled, and people are using some encryption if it's appropriate. So just to give you an idea of what we see as some of the challenges, out there can be sort of unsecured or unmanaged devices. And why this is important, you need to be able to ensure that everybody is at the same level of security, and that people don't fall behind, or that there's vulnerabilities that on these particular systems. There's also been, we've noticed, and everybody I suppose has heard that there's been a surge in COVID-themed attacks. For example, we would have seen recently reported in Northern Ireland around the vaccination process, where people were getting messages on their phones or about registering to get their vaccination, but these were hoaxed, people were being asked to put in their bank details. So there's lots of these attacks that are happening. Also, we've found that there are people using, I suppose, non-enterprise VPNs or third-party VPNs, which in themselves are a good thing, but they have become attacked more and more by criminals, and people think that they're using sort of secure communication. However, because they've been attacked and being compromised, your data and your systems could be compromised also. With people sort of working from home also, like they're using more and more sort of cloud-based tools, whether this is for productivity or communication or collaboration. They may be storing sort of company information in, I suppose, what we classify as unsanctioned applications, or shadow IT, as some people call it. And again, they're outside the security coverage of an organization. And even though that this may help the users with their productivity, but it can increase the risk to IT security. We've also found that there can be gaps within the remote working policies and procedures, so it's important for organizations to have these clearly defined and effectively communicated to their users, what they can do and what they shouldn't do. And I suppose this leads on to basically your risk management, and the whole idea is to reduce the risk to the organization and to the users. What's going on here now? Sorry. It's not just sort of CommSec or Sophos saying this. This is a notification out from Europol making people aware of emails and text messages which are being used to attack users to gather information, whether it's credit card details or whatever. So we feel in this particular area, it's very good for organizations to have IT security awareness training to help the employees protect themselves from these attacks, and also eventually protect the company's data. Again, just to sort of highlight some of the variety of attacks that are out there, from ransomware, which has been around for a long time, but it's increasing all the time. The Internet of Things, they're being attacked, the devices, Wi-Fi and so on. Cloud attacks, phishing attacks, they're just growing all the time. Then other ones such as blockchain and cryptocurrency. This is where people want to take over your systems to help sort of mine for the cryptocurrency, and this can be a big disruptor for organizations. Software vulnerabilities, as I said, if your systems are not managed and they're not being kept up to date, there can be vulnerabilities in there that can be exploited. Then you also have zero-day attacks. And then with regards to bring your own device, we found it's very good if people are using their own personal devices, that maybe you can look at creating containers within these devices, so that the corporate or company or applications are separated from the personal applications, so you're keeping them more secure. So there are the certain things that people need to consider, and these attacks are happening all the time. So I just want to touch on how CommSec and Sophos can help in this particular area. So CommSec ourselves, we can help organizations by doing a IT security audit, a risk assessment, gap analysis, see where you are with your IT security, and if there are any areas that you need to enhance or improve the IT security. We're doing this against, I suppose, international standards such as ISO 27001 or Cyber Risk Essentials. Following on from that, then we feel that it's important that organizations try to have a centralized management of the security of all their devices that the end users are using, to ensure that their endpoint servers, gateways, whether it's email, web, are protected, that if you can have all of the protection or the tools that they're using communicating to each other, and then you can orchestrate an automated response or an incident response, and you can sort of improve the overall security to your end users and your organization. We also need to understand around the cloud security. Now, a lot of people would have applications in the cloud, and inherently they are secure, but people do have to remember that it's the responsibility of the organization to ensure who is accessing these applications, what can they do, and you need to get that tested and so that the applications and the data in those applications in the cloud cannot be compromised. Following on from that, there are lots of options around the solutions from ourselves and Sophos, where we can do a managed service, and you can get flexible licensing to adapt with your particular circumstances with regards to your users, whether your numbers are growing or changing. We can help you in that particular space, and then you can evolve into a fully managed service where we can manage the rollout of these tools, or make sure that they're being updated, and also manage an incident if something does happen. I just want to sort of move on to sort of say that CommSec, we're a Sophos Gold partner, and we work closely with them. All our technical people are available, and they are skilled up and trained within the Sophos suite of products. And we also provide security as a service for around 24/7 monitoring, vulnerability scanning, and so on. And this, we feel this is important because we've had certain instances over the last while where companies have been infected by Emotet, and we've been able to use the Sophos suite of products to source the infection, isolate the infection and clean it up, and then also make sure that there's no further infections throughout an organization or other users. So this is all part of the process, and with ourselves and Sophos, we feel we can give organizations a very strong and secure offering. So what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to pass you over to Jonathan Hope, who's Senior Technology Evangelist. And Jonathan is going to, I suppose, show you how Sophos has adapted to the new climate, and give you an overview of Sophos and how their offering can help and improve the IT security of your users. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, so allow me to introduce myself very briefly. Yeah, as has been mentioned, my name is John Hope. I am one of the Senior Technology Evangelists at Sophos, and yeah, it's my pleasure to talk to you a little bit about what the future might hold. Now, I'm not a clairvoyant, but I will certainly do my very best to give you some indications about how the industry is going to change. And if you look back sort of in a pre-COVID period, you'll see that workforces were already in the process of becoming increasingly mobile. So it was starting to become a little bit more standard, depending on where you are in the world and which industry you work in, to be working from home. But obviously, coronavirus meant that organizations really had to adapt very quickly to having to operate in a world where working out of an office environment wasn't the norm, and in many cases wasn't actually something that was possible. And organizations really tripped over themselves to get into a position where they could operate as near to normal as possible under those very difficult sets of circumstances. So very rapidly rolling out things like VPNs, rapidly rolling out devices for people to be able to take home and to adapt to the working conditions such as I guess they remain to this day. And we feel that maybe where we are now is probably, I hate the term the new norm, but this probably is a change which is a fundamental and irreversible change that organizations will adopt a more flexible approach to working. And it's believed that organizations, even after the pandemic is over, will maintain this stance of operating in a hybrid environment where maybe people go to the office for some days of the week and work from home on other days. So that obviously presents a whole bunch of challenges, which I'll talk about straight away. So we'll hit the first challenge headlong, and that is the fact that IT security obviously has a very long history and pedigree, and it's largely built on the assumption that everybody is on the premises. So things like antivirus and their management, for example, would typically rely on having a direct network connection to the clients and to a server that was actually coordinating the management. And that, of course, means at the moment you take a laptop and you take it out of the office, then it becomes an unknown quantity because you can't push policy to it, you can't get updates from it, you don't really know the health and the status of that device, which is clearly very problematic. And again, really because of the legacy of the fact that IT security has been built on the assumption that everyone's in the office, then there's always been a strong emphasis on the perimeter as your first line of defense. And it's a little bit like a fortress. You know, we've built up these big walls and these big barriers to protect our assets, and we've kind of assumed that everything is behind those four walls and is kept secure by that perimeter. And of course, now that perimeter no longer exists, and that clearly presents a whole bunch of security challenges. And then you've also got what I call the elephant in the room, and that is probably more of a managerial issue than it is a technology issue, and that is really the visibility of what people are doing when they are at home, and having the ability to control what they get up to, what applications they download, what websites they visit, how they spend their time, all of those kind of managerial challenges, which, you know, obviously does overlap into IT security quite heavily. And then you've got another real fundamental challenge that IT teams just in general are stretched to breaking point. You know, even before the pandemic, organizations probably hadn't invested as much as they should in IT security and IT functionality in general, and the pandemic really exposed some of those significant weak spots when it comes to investment strategy. And ultimately, organizations and their IT teams are really, I'm sure you can empathize with this as listeners, struggling to keep up with the demands of really just keeping the lights on, never mind rolling out projects like enabling and facilitating people to be able to work remotely and work from home. So lots and lots of challenges there. I'm going to now offer you some practical advice on what you can do to help mitigate some of these challenges. And we're going to start by introducing the Sophos security ecosphere. So Sophos, obviously, as a preeminent IT security provider, we've made it our business to create not just a set of security products, but a security ecosphere that allows those products to work together as a system and to coordinate things like the management and control of those IT security assets. And what I'm going to do now is take you through how this helps to meet some of the needs of IT managers, especially, you know, framed around this new hybrid working environment. So let's remind ourselves of challenge number one, which was being able to see devices wherever they happen to be. And that's where Sophos Central comes in, because Sophos Central is our new management platform that allows us to see all of the devices wherever they happen to be. So as long as they've got internet connectivity, we can see those devices, we can get updates from them, we can change policies, and we can control those wherever they are. And again, because this is a web-based management console, not only does it mean we can see all those devices, but it means our IT managers can access Sophos Central wherever they happen to be. So it's mobile friendly, people can access it at home, at the weekends, out of hours, as well as being able to access on their traditional sort of desktop and laptop type machine. So that helps enormously with the visibility angle. And you can see here a little bit of a testimony from one of our customers that came on board, really just saying how much it really changed their visibility and really changed their world when it came to being able to see those devices, and also, as I've already touched on, being able to manage those devices remotely as well. And because it's cloud-based, it's also ready to rock and roll as well. And we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail later on. But essentially, we have built the security environment for you. So you don't have to worry about maintaining the architecture, maintaining the environment. It's ready to go and it's available from any location. So that sort of talks a little bit about the accessibility, the visibility side of things. Let's now shift focus to that other problem around the sort of traditional idea of the perimeter and the fact that that perimeter is very rapidly dissolving. We've really changed the way that endpoint security works. So if we look at this sort of evolution cycle and we start on the far left here, then when Sophos Central was first created, then it was really just running our endpoint protection using malware signatures, and things have evolved quite dramatically now, such that we can offer our next generation protection. We can offer our search and destroy technology with our EDR product, and we can also offer access to our managed threat response service through Sophos Central as well. So what we're doing here is basically empowering the endpoint to be as good as it possibly can be when it comes to protecting itself. So in particular, InterceptX is there to deal with those new and unknown threats and to operate in a signatureless fashion, so that if something new and unseen crops up, then InterceptX has got the very best chance of protecting itself without necessarily having to rely on a firewall. And then you can move up the stack a little bit and you can add EDR in if you want, because EDR gives you then the ability to search across your estate, look across all of your environments, look for not just detections but also things like suspicious activities, look for things like legitimate tools being used against the organization. So PowerShell, prime example of something which we use every day as an admin tool, but can be used by the cyber criminals for nefarious deeds. And being able to see how that tool is being used and recognize suspicious, potentially suspicious uses of those tools is absolutely key. Or alternatively, again, in a world where IT teams are increasingly under stress, then now's probably a good time to talk about shifting over to the managed threat response service. So effectively outsourcing that detection and that threat hunting to our security operations center at Sophos, so that we can 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, look across your network and look for these suspicious detections on your behalf. And should you wish to actually engage and carry out actions, remedial actions, and block activity on your behalf if you choose to do so. So you've really now got a choice of how that how your endpoint protection is secure, depending on your budget and your appetite for risk. But what I would say really is that the world has moved on quite a long way since we talked about Central Endpoint Advanced as the key security product, not least because we now see 450,000 new malware samples every single day. And what that means really is that this idea of next generation it's no longer really a luxury, and in my opinion it really is the sort of most basic that you should have. So I would change that diagram and shift it around to say that these are really the three options that you have if you want to maintain a decent security environment, either just having the predictive proactive security of InterceptX, or empowering yourself with tools to search and destroy on your network, or alternatively, if you really feel like you don't have the time or the expertise to invest in that, to actually outsource your endpoint protection to give you the very best protection, given that we, as I say, we now live in a world where the perimeter isn't really our only line of defense, and we need to rely more on the endpoint to protect. Okay, so moving away from the endpoint looking after itself, let's address the elephant in the room there about things like productivity. And the good thing is that Sophos Central has lots of really neat tools to help boost productivity and boost visibility. So little tricks like including web filtering in our endpoint product means that we can block things like gambling, pornography, unsuitable, unproductive sites. We can control the applications that an endpoint is allowed to use. We can carry out things like DLP functionality as well. So DLP is an acronym, if you're not familiar with it, is data loss prevention. So the endpoint can do more than just protect. It can actually look at organizational policy and say, I'm not going to allow people to send out the database on email. I'm not going to allow them to use a USB drive to copy all of my data. And we can also manage the encryption of devices as well, of course, because something that's often overlooked actually is that because devices are now more often found in users' homes, then there is potentially an opportunity for those devices to be stolen. And it's really important to make sure that they're properly secured and encrypted, so that if they do fall into a criminal's hands, that the worst is that you lose the device itself and that you don't actually lose the data that's on that device. So encrypting them means that it keeps it out of the hands of those thieves. Okay, then looking at the IT teams being overburdened and overstretched, well, that's probably because they're juggling multiple different consoles. They're trying to make products work together that maybe aren't really designed to, and they're experiencing a critical shortage of staff. And a large number of organizations, 46% according to this survey, would say that the lack of cybersecurity skills means that it's really problematic to successfully protect an enterprise. And that's where we can start talking about the fact that, first of all, Sophos Central is a tool which is there, it's ready to go, and it means that there's no setup time associated with getting security off the ground. And it's a cloud-based platform that covers not just endpoint protection, but then all the other cool stuff that we do here at Sophos as well. So our firewall, our endpoint, our mobile protection, encryption, our user training tool with fish threat, our wireless access points, our firewall, and all those kind of tools, and even things like public cloud, all included inside the same management dashboard. And not just included in the dashboard, but actually working together as a system as well, which is really, really important when you start to look at the statistics about the quantity of malware that's out there. Of course, the cybersecurity landscape isn't getting any easier, it's not getting any better. And coronavirus has really been a force multiplier in a large number of attacks, and in particular, attacks associated with things like email scams and phishing. So we touched on this point earlier on, but there's a graphic that really illustrates the fact that we've seen an enormous increase in the amount of phishing because people are obviously hungry for information about the pandemic and want to know what's going on, and the cyber criminals are using that to their advantage and trying to dupe users into downloading malicious content or visiting malicious websites and that kind of thing. And although we don't have any exact statistics on how many of those types of attacks are actually out there, then you can see just by looking at the registration of domains that have things like COVID-19 or Corona in them, you can see that that has gone up dramatically as a result of the pandemic. It's a term that we hadn't heard of maybe 2 years ago, and now all of a sudden it's such a popular domain for registration because cyber criminals are going to use that to register domains so that they can set up fake websites and again lure people into clicking and following those links through. So in a background where the world is such a challenging place, how do we use cybersecurity as a system to help? Well, Sophos Central, as I mentioned, is a tool that you can use to coordinate your security across all these different platforms, and it can give us a much better level of protection because it allows us to combine the predictive prevention of things like Intercept X along with the real-time detection capabilities that you'll find inside our signature-based products. And should an incident occur where something goes wrong with the device, then it will automatically isolate that particular device. And it also offers us huge gains in efficiency as well. First of all, the efficiencies that are inherent with a single management tool to run all of these different products, plus the automated response when things do go wrong. So we'll look at that in just a short while in more detail, but the ability to isolate endpoints, stop infection spreading, and then to provide useful and timely information about the root cause of these events so that we can take remedial action, we can correct the problems to make sure they don't happen again. And all of this ultimately feeds into a fantastic virtuous loop because we offer a much better level of protection by coordinating our security. That means we experience less security incidents, and it means that we have more time to invest in our security and to be proactive when it comes to even basic tasks like password management and patch management, for example. And that means that we're in a better place. That means we experience fewer security incidents. That means we have more time to invest, and therefore we get fewer security incidents. And this virtuous loop just runs and runs and runs. And it's a real way to enjoy a proper return on investment on your cybersecurity estate and the investments that you've put into that platform. So it's definitely we feel the future of cybersecurity is this ability to work as a system. And talking about working as a system, what I'll do now is just show you very quickly one of the practical ways that cybersecurity works together as a system. So what we've got here on the screen is a very simple network with 3 protected endpoints all running Intercept X. And if one of those devices somehow does experience a compromise, then it will tell the rest of the estate using what we call a security heartbeat. Now that's normally green, indicating the device is healthy. However, if something does does go wrong, the heartbeat will change to red. That's telling the rest of the system that this device specifically has some kind of issue, and the system will respond by automatically isolating that device, locking it down, and then the firewall on the left hand side here is then preventing access to critical assets like servers, and it's blocking access to the internet as well. Now that's massively powerful. If you think where the cyber criminals are, they're not typically inside your network, they're normally on the outside world, and by blocking off the internet, you're preventing those cyber criminals from pushing further instructions and commands to that device, and you're preventing data from being exfiltrated out of that device and into the cyber criminals' hands. So it's hugely powerful. What we also do is we offer what's called lateral movement protection as well, and that basically is the concept of one infected machine immediately looking for other victims inside the network. If you cast your mind back to things like NotPetya and WannaCry, for example, the reason that they hit the headlines so heavily is because they were very, very good at finding other victims inside the network, and they brought organizations like hospitals down very, very quickly because they were so good at spreading around. And our automated response will basically tip off all of the other devices protected by Sophos in the network, not to communicate with our rogue guy in the corner here, because we know that this device has a problem. We don't want to accept any further communications from there. So we're going to stop that malware from spreading, and we're going to take what could be an enormous outbreak and we're going to isolate it down to just one machine. So this is another example of a virtuous loop here, where instead of dealing with a cleanup across potentially thousands of computers on the estate, you're just cleaning up the initial beachhead, you're just cleaning up that one machine. And once that cleanup process has completed, the security heartbeat will go back to green, and we can get that device back into productivity and allow it back into the network. So we're obviously not getting in the way of productivity. So there you go, that's just one little example of cybersecurity working as a system to help coordinate defenses. One other thing which is useful as well with synchronized security is you can use that with our wireless access points. And if you've got devices like mobile devices or laptops that maybe you've been in the wilderness for potentially over 12 months, the security heartbeat is going to work when they come back to the office, and the access points will detect their heartbeat. And if we know the device has got some kind of compromise, then we can actually choose to isolate that machine, put it into a separate network, and keep it off the corporate environment until that device has been cleaned and been remediated. So another little example there about how synchronized security can help in this sort of ever shifting landscape of people working from different locations. So we've covered a lot, and you might be wondering, well, what are the next practical steps that I can do? And what I would suggest, first of all, is take a look at these 3 white papers. I've used these to harvest some of the statistics that I've mentioned during this session. So the State of Ransomware 2020 talks a lot about cybercrime and where these trends are coming from, and which organizations are most likely to be hit. The Sophos 2021 threat report is more of a forward-looking white paper, in particular talking about new working practices. And then we've got Cybersecurity Evolved there on the right-hand side, and this talks about the advantages of cybersecurity as a system in a bit more detail. So those are all just a couple of pages long, but certainly worth your time reading. And what I'd also suggest as well, particularly if you're already a Sophos customer, is take a look at Sophos Central. Get yourself registered for a free trial on there, because it will show you all of the different products we have inside there, and there's a pre-configured demo environment as well that you can take a little look at. And of course, myself and my colleagues will be more than happy to take you through a little demo there, just to give you a bit of a feel of how that all looks. So I would certainly take that one away as another action as well. But that's my little session done. I will now hand you back, and we'll invite some questions.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Yeah, we have a couple of quick questions here just to talk about. I suppose someone is making the point, well, in or out of the office, does a platform like Sophos kind of care? Does it get impacted one way or another? Does it have to be manually redirected, or how does that work?
Okay, so there's a couple of different ways that the security ecosphere adapts to where the device is. So if you're in the office environment, then your endpoint will automatically go to the nearest server to go and get its updates. However, if you're working from home, then it will fetch those updates directly from Sophos. So that's kind of dealing with the security update side of things. When it comes to the security heartbeat, if you're using a VPN client to connect back to the office, then that VPN client is going to pass the security heartbeat through to the office as well. So again, we can carry out things like the isolation if we know the device has got some kind of compromise. There's a little bit of a glimpse into the future. What we're looking at Sophos is what's called zero trust networking as well. So we're adding in some functionality in the not too distant future to allow the control of access to resources and assets, and particularly things like software as a service, things like maybe Salesforce as a prime example of an online tool, to limit access to devices that might be in a compromised state, and again, regardless and irrespective of where those devices are actually located. So that's something that's coming down in the future, but certainly for now, the clients update themselves wherever they happen to be, they report in from wherever they happen to be, and you can use your heartbeat in conjunction with the VPN client. So I hope that answers the question that was posed.
Sure, yeah. I guess there's another question looking at the overhead of managing this office estate, and you mentioned the whole point of manage it yourself or get a partner like CommSec to manage it, and some of the benefit of that. Joe, or between yourself and John, do you want to just explore that one for a minute? I suppose what that involves in real life as an admin overhead, you know, if people want to take this on board.
Okay. Well, I'll give you my slant to start with, and that is that security isn't a set and forget type product, and whatever security platform you invest in, then you do need to be realistic about the amount of time it takes. You know, the basics of I want to deploy my endpoint and make sure it's kept up to date is great, but then you need to make sure that those clients are still out there in the field, that they're successfully updating themselves as an absolute basic. But if you want to carry out things like threat hunting, then it's pointless buying our EDR solution if you're not going to invest the time and effort in actually then managing that estate and actually carrying out searches. And that's maybe where looking at engaging with CommSec and our managed threat response service might be a good idea. If you know, if you're going to be realistic about the fact that you don't have the time to invest in doing searches and checking for stuff on a regular basis, then it's probably better to get the experts in to do it on your behalf. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, we have clients out there where we're managing the Sophos estate, you know, for endpoints, firewalls, their Wi-Fi devices, and we're making sure that they're all updated. But we're also doing, as Jonathan says, we're also sort of providing additional, you know, running the threat hunting, you know, helping with cleanups, or just managing the whole estate, and giving the end user reports on what's happening on what attacks have happened, so that they can show to management that, you know, there is a return on investment, because sometimes some people feel that this is just a sort of it's just a cost. You know, we can identify and show that there is a return on the investment there, you know, so that can be done, yes.
And here's another one, just, I guess, no, this is very competitive, but looking at the basic tools that come with Windows, like Defender, out of the box, kind of a straightforward tools as an endpoint stuff. You know, obviously we know Sophos is a full suite, it's a very different thing, but just for the person who asked the question, in terms of why this, like for smaller businesses particularly, I suppose, if they're looking at this going, do we really need to step up to this? Is this not more of an enterprise or a larger company's investment? For a smaller business who may be using basic tools, and even some bigger ones we've mentioned here, compared to the things that are in things like Windows Defender, do we really need, or what would be the argument for stepping into the realm of what Sophos delivers?
Fair enough. Well, sorry, you go ahead. I went first last time, so you go right ahead.
So I just like to say, well, first of all, you know, on the size of the organization, what we like about the Sophos is that it you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, you can be a small business with 5 to 10 users. We've got some customers like that where we're managing their AV, and we're giving them the reports, and we're sort of installing the firewalls and so on. So to go back to the point about sort of comparing it to other sort of tools, and you mentioned Defender and stuff like that. Yeah, all these, first of all, it's good to have that level of protection, I suppose it just comes down to the usability, the flexibility, and sort of covering off all of the areas. You know, whether it's the endpoint, email, firewall, and you want to have them as John was saying, an ecosphere, so that they're all communicating together to give you a better overall protection. Whereas, you know, if you're just looking at a single point solution, and then if you've got multiple point solutions, well, then the overall effectiveness may not be as strong. That would be my opinion.
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, it's not an enterprise problem, and it's not an enterprise solution either. What we've consistently found is organizations of all sizes get hit, and the biggest difference between a small organization and a big one is that big organizations typically have a bigger IT staff and can cope with the management overhead. And actually buying cybersecurity as a system means that the management overhead isn't there, and the system coordinates in the ways that I've just shown you, you know, all for itself. And that almost has a better effect in smaller organizations. You know, taking that management burden away is a big deal. And it's always really important to remember that the cost of a cybersecurity solution is not just measured in the upfront purchase price. It also comes down to how long it take to maintain that estate, and how much human resources are involved in keeping that estate running and up to date. And you know, what we find is using a bunch of disparate tools might, in some circumstances, be cheaper up front, but it's never cheaper in the long run, because you know, you're spending so much more time hopping between consoles, dealing with infections that have fallen between the gaps, and having cybersecurity that's all working together means that, you know, you're not plowing that time in, and those staff members can go off and do other things and actually help drive the business forward. So yeah, you know, I would certainly say look at it from the bigger picture of the overall cost of ownership, not just the purchase price.
We have a question here with regard to the Sophos solution of having the firewall and the endpoint from the same vendor. The question is that really a good idea?
Okay, interesting one. Yeah, probably stems. I'd love to speak to the person who posed this question in more detail, but it probably stems from, if I can be respectful, a possibly slightly older way of thinking, where people would think that if I have my firewall from vendor A and my endpoint from vendor B, that if one vendor doesn't catch it, that maybe the other one will. And the reality is now that, you know, cybersecurity vendors will pretty much get signatures out and get updates to capture stuff at pretty much the same time. And actually, what you really want is not it actually almost comes back to the same point as the last question. What you really don't want is a disparate security estate. You want a single management platform to run everything together, because it's cheaper, it's easier, it's more efficient, and it's easy to be an expert in one dashboard. And the benefits of having cybersecurity that coordinates its own defenses probably outweighs any, what I would say is probably a perceived benefit of better security from different vendors. I think now the ease of management and automation probably out trumps those benefits.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, you know, there used to be a sort of a thought around using best of breed for particular areas, whether it be email, web, or firewall, or endpoint. But I think as time has gone on, Sophos, you know, their suite of products are all, each one of those are coming into the area of being best of breed in their own right. So you're getting, you know, again, you're getting a really good coverage and protection by using the suite of products from Sophos.
Okay, thanks guys. We have that's it in terms of the technical questions. I've one other person asking, is there a certificate or points for attending this? No, it's not. We won't be giving a certificate for attending, I'm afraid. It doesn't earn CPD points or anything like that, but we will be giving you a copy of this video. We'll be sending a link to everyone who attended, and it'll be available on our website from next week to download and to view as well. So if that's all the questions, guys, thank you all very much for your time. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jonathan, very much for your contribution. That was excellent. And I hope everyone found that useful. And if you have any queries, please do get in touch with us, and we'd love to talk to you. Okay.
Thank you very much. I hope people found it informative. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Jonathan.